ask us, why is Collins so important, or why does Collins grave stand out? Why is there flowers on it every day? There's no real definite reason. There's a couple of reasons why Collins is the most popular in Glasnevin. Well, the flowers are here on a daily basis, but the big bouquets you see, they're changed every Sunday. So an organisation known as the Collins 22 Society will change the big bouquets. But the other flowers you see here are left here by Collins' fan club. He's a massive fan club. So if you come up here 3 days of the year, his birthday, which was a couple of weeks ago, he got his birthday cards and his presents. His anniversary, that'll be covered in flowers, wreaths. There'll be even flowers outside the grave itself. Be put around the grave more than on it. But Valentine's Day, I mean, if you come up here on Valentine's Day, you might be jealous. To be honest, like, this fella gets cards, love letters, presents. I've seen I love you balloons reaching to the height of that headstone, and his bouquet of roses. Not cheap either. I mean, like, expensive flowers as well. And Collins is nearly dead 100 years, and he still attracts his male and female admirers. What makes him so popular compared to all those other men and women? Well, there is a couple of reasons. Liam Neeson and the film does help. So if you watch the film Michael Collins and Liam Neeson, Alan Rickman, Julia Roberts, yeah, that will play a role in his popularity. People love Liam Neeson more than the actual Michael Collins himself. But yeah, they come here leaving flowers as a result. His role in Irish history, I mean, like, he's a massive impact on Irish history as a revolutionary. But also the third and final reason will be the myth. Like, there's multiple conspiracies surrounding his death, and he's a young man as well. So because of his age and the kind of lack of information about the ambush when he was killed, the film, and who he was, that makes his grave extremely popular. The Collins story, well, there he is, born in County Cork in 1890. So his background is really simple. A large family, loads of brothers and sisters. They're all from a farming background, but Collins showed a big interest in Irish history from a very young age, from the age of about 7 or 8. His father, who was a close friend of O'Donovan Rossa, you can imagine Collins' father would have been telling him Irish history, the stories from Ireland's past, and that inspired Collins from a really young age. When he was 16, he'd left Cork, he moved to London. Now, Collins living in London, but also working in a post office. So his sister looks after Collins. While in the post office, he develops a background of finance and organisational skills. As his sister would often say, that's vital for Michael Collins throughout the Irish War of Independence. He does return to Ireland. He fights in the Rising. Who is he? Like, he's generally unknown. If you're Michael Collins during the Rising, there you are, in a volunteer uniform. You're a young man, you're Joseph Plunkett's assistant or aide-de-camp, and you fight bravely as a soldier in the General Post Office. That kind of summarises Collins during the Rising, fighting bravely as a soldier, but kind of kept the head down and remained more or less unknown. When the leaders were executed following the Rising, Collins at this stage is in Wales. He's in a prison camp known as Frongok. Now within Frongok, you can imagine if me and you were there, you all fought in the Rising together. Now we're all in the same prison camp. So Collins used it to his advantage, plan, recruit, and organise the War of Independence. That's exactly what he done in Frongok prison camp. By 1919 it began. Now Collins made a number of changes to fight this conflict. So by 1919, you can imagine, see that uniform, the volunteer uniform, he said get rid of it. That's your uniform now. So if you wear your everyday clothing, you become an invisible army. You strike a target, you live on the run, you're disappearing amongst the crowd, you're running the British authority ragged. Eamon de Valera, Cathal Brugha, Countess Markic, they wanted big, large-scale engagements to fight the British. But as Collins said, look, they squash every Irish rebellion with ease. They also just won a First World War. There's no way we can compete with the size of the British Army, their weaponry, and their backing. So we have to fight them a different way. So Collins introduced that guerrilla warfare, or hit and run tactic, which ran them ragged. It's extremely difficult, even to this day, to fight guerrilla warfare. The second thing was the money. So thanks to Eamon de Valera, a lot of money is fundraised. Collins' financial background knows exactly how to use the money, but the weapons. Now think of a Thompson machine gun in 1920. If you're a member of the British Army and you confiscate a Thompson machine gun, you're looking at it going, what is it? Even they are not familiar with these weapons. So at one stage, Collins organised that better weapons are brought into Ireland to fight this War of Independence. Therefore, the British Army had to step up their weaponry. The next thing, the intelligence programme. So Michael said if you really want to beat the British Empire at their own game, their backbone, their foundation of their empire is an intelligence programme that's never been challenged. So men, women and even children right throughout the country and parts of Dublin became his eyes and ears on the street. They gathered the intel, they give him the intelligence, and he uses that to his advantage. So a lot of men and women would have worked for Collins. With that information, his tactic and the weaponry, with the money, Collins can organise a squad or the 12 apostles. Now if Michael stood there today, he'd tell you they were a ruthless organisation. to give an informer or a spy, anybody working for the British authority as an informer or spy or employed by the British authority, you got a warning. If you didn't accept the warning, you will be assassinated. So Collins used a squad of the 12 apostles to assassinate British spies and informers and basically paralyse their intelligence programme, which really frustrated the British authority. Bring all that together, he had £15,000 in his head. I mean, he was the most wanted man in the empire at one stage. And yet again, he cycled around Dublin on his bike. He went around parts of the country. They couldn't get him. They had no photograph of him at one stage. There's even an account or a story or two of Michael Collins stopping at a British checkpoint, having a few cigarettes of British soldiers and officers, having a great chat. They thought he was a great fella, but little did they know it was the man they're trying to identify. That's the type of character Collins was. But nevertheless, by 1921, the War of Independence was a bit of a conflict. All sides of it, including civilians, are buried in Glasnevin. A lot of civilians suffered during that conflict. The truce was called. Both British and Irish authorities said, look, we can no longer fight this, so we'll negotiate some form of agreement, the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Now, Arthur Griffith, there he is, politician, journalist, founder of Sinn Féin, very towards that direction, will negotiate the Anglo-Irish Treaty alongside Collins. They will head the Irish negotiating team. As Griffith said, look who we negotiated with. So Griffith was trying to tell you, the heavyweights of the empire were there that day. I mean, you had the victors of the First World War, Winston Churchill, Lloyd George, Birkenhead, Hammer Greenwood. These men back then were very well experienced politicians. So Collins and Griffith negotiated the treaty, they signed the treaty, and as Michael Collins said, well, it's not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire, but it gives us the freedom to achieve it. Surely after 700 years, our own government with a peace agreement is a stepping stone to uniting Ireland. But he did say himself, I've signed my own death warrant here today, but in 6 months we're fighting against each other, and Arthur Griffith has passed away as a result of a brain hemorrhage. And there's one of the last known images of Collins alive at Griffith's funeral. So there's Collins of Glasnevin, Commander-in-Chief, Free State Army or pro-treaty. There he is in his uniform. Little did he know, within 12 days after this photograph was taken, his own funeral takes place within our cemetery. So one of the last known images of the big fellow alive. Now 7 headstones away, there's a tricolour on her grave today. She's only 7 headstones in. That's where Kitty Kiernan is buried. So there's Kitty, not Julia Roberts, as people have asked us before. It's actually the real Kitty Kiernan, not Julia. So she's engaged to Michael Collins. Now if you're a Kitty during the Civil War, like other men and women, she knew the dangers of it, in particular the south of the country. So if you're Michael Collins, you're looking at Kerry and County Cork as anti-treaty strongholds. Collins described the south of Ireland as bandit country. But in an effort to end the Civil War, he will travel to Cork, and he wants to end the Civil War one way or the other, peacefully, forcefully. He wants to end it. He absolutely hates it. Kitty, who's engaged to Collins, warns him against it. And of course, Collins quite famously said, Kitty, sure, they won't shoot me in my own county, don't they come from there? So he arrives in County Cork. By the 22nd of August 1922, Michael Collins was ambushed at Ballinablaw. Now what happened that day, we've all read countless accounts of it. We've watched documentaries and everything, and yet again we still can't give you a definite answer. There was a 7.5 minute gun battle between pro and anti-treaty forces. I mean, it's a very scruffy gun battle. Ricochet bullets everywhere. And within those 6 to 7.5 minutes, he is the only casualty. So Collins is shot dead at the age of 31. Myths, conspiracies surround his death even to this day. And he's only 31 years of age when he died. So many people say, God, look at Collins. He ran the empire ragged every now and again. Put the fear of God into them, but yet again negotiated the first ever peace agreement between us and Britain, and from it a measure of independence came from it. But yet again, the British authorities could never identify Collins, but an Irishman shot him in his own county after about 6 to 7 minutes. So people often say the tragic end of Collins and Kitty as well makes him popular. Kitty was buying her wedding dress the day he was shot and killed. So when she arrived home with a wedding dress in hand, she learned the news of her fiance's death. She led the funeral up the footpath here. Now, it's very hard to emphasise the size and scale of Collins' funeral. If you think Parnell's is big at 300,000, well, 500,000 lined the streets of the capital for Collins's. So there's O'Connell Street in Dublin. I mean, you can barely make out the O'Connell monument. Collins' coffin is there today, you can see in the photograph. Have a look at the footage and the photographs of Collins' funeral, where over 500,000 people would line the streets of Dublin. All sides of the conflict, pro and anti-treaty, were united in grief, temporarily, at Collins' funeral, and the British authority would pay their respect to Michael Collins as well. And Kitty led the funeral up here. And this is Collins' final resting place since 1922. So you can just decide what makes him number one. An interesting quote, 1966, President of Ireland, Eamon de Valera, said, "In my opinion, in the fullness of time, history will record the greatness of Michael Collins. It'll be recorded at my expense." So in other words, de Valera said, "I'll remain the villain throughout Irish history, but Collins remains the romantic hero." But yet again, I see reconciliation between both. That headstone, this whole area, purchased by Eamon de Valera and his government in memory of Michael Collins. His epitaph, that engraving on the front of his headstone, written by Eamon de Valera. So I think it's a tribute by Eamon de Valera to an old friend of his. Bit of reconciliation. You can decide what makes it number one. I mean, you can say Liam Neeson in the film does play a role in his popularity, of course, and his role in Irish history and the myth surrounding his death. But there's a couple of reasons why I think Collins is a more or less better visited than the likes of O'Connell, Markovich, de Valera. He's a couple of things. If you want your grave looking like this in years to come, if you want to be a hero throughout history, men or women, you're going to have to be a couple of things like Collins. You're going to have to be good looking. You're going to have to be young, intelligent, charismatic, a film made about your life, and dead. If you're those 5 things in history, 5 or 6 things in history, your grave may look like this in years to come. Some of us have those boxes ticked already. So some of us may have this grave in years to come. I don't know. Yet again, you can see there's very big names from Irish history in Glasnevin. That's only a fraction of the history. So do come back if you have the time. Now, there's a couple of options before you go. The visitor centre, including the cafe, is open to 5. So for anybody who wants to walk around the exhibition, feel free, absolutely no problem. It's up and downstairs. Anybody interested in purchasing a ticket for the O'Connell Tower, just let the lads know at the desk around the walking tour. You have a discount price, and you can, of course, climb the O'Connell Tower.